Good morning, good afternoon. Welcome to Poland Weekly Business Focus program. Today, my guest is Ignacy Morawski, Chief Economist at Puls Biznesu, and we are going to talk about Poland's future, economic future, because I think as Poland, we like to emphasize, our economic story standing behind our 30 years of continuous economic growth. But now it's a time to really debate on our future.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me.
Yes, and you have prepared an excellent report how Central Europe can win its future in AI era. So today I would like to focus on Poland and to see how can we benefit with the new trends. Are we actually ready to embrace those trends? But maybe before we deep dive into the future, let's focus a little bit on what happened and what were the key drivers of our economic success in the past 30 years, and then we'll move to the future.
Yes, when we look at the past 30 years, Poland and other countries in Central and Eastern Europe were among the top global economies in terms of dynamism. There are only two regions globally that are as dynamic as CEE. Well, first CEE and second Asia Tigers, right? So Japan, Korea, Taiwan, Singapore, they were growing at similar rates 3 or 4 decades ago. So this is here in Central Europe a very dynamic region, and I think it's a result of a specific combination of two factors. We are very well educated, so the communism left societies which were badly organized and inefficient, but very well educated in terms of basic skills. I don't mean some higher level scientific development, but basic skills like reading, maths, counting, thinking, critical thinking. So the level of education was pretty good. And the second factor, we are cheap. So the average earnings here in the region are much lower than in Western Europe. So in the times of globalizing economy, growing value chains, we provided Western economies with productive and cheap labor. So we grew over the last 30 years, mainly thanks to exports. To give you an example, today we export in 2 weeks, so half a month, the same amount of, or not amount, the same value of goods as 30 years ago we did over the course of 1 year, right? So that's the progress in exports. So the exports was the key driver. It is driven mainly by foreign investments, so foreign companies from Western Europe opening their factories or offices here and selling abroad. So this is more or less a growth model, being very well educated, close to developed markets, and have competitive wages. Now, obviously, this growth model will become more difficult once we are closer to Western Europe in terms of wages and earnings and prices.
And that's already happening. So now that we have those discussions,
Yes.
how we can build on what we have,
Yes.
what we achieved, to jump into the future and continue the growth.
Yeah, I think it has been changing the model, the growth model and the structure of economy. To give you an example, between 2010 and 2020, the average wage in Poland compared to Germany was around 25 to 30%, right? Recalculating in euro, so quite low. Now, over the last couple of years, it grew to almost 40%, both due to nominal wage growth in Poland, so the average nominal wage growth in Poland is high, and the strengthening of the currency. So the zloty exchange rate is stronger than 2 or 3 years ago. So the wages in Poland compared to German are higher. They are still much lower, but they are higher, much higher than they were 10 or 20 years ago. So for every foreign investor, the calculation of, I would say, the investment in Poland is changing. And now it's important that the economy adjusts by producing more advanced goods and services. So when we become more expensive, we have to produce more advanced goods and services, We cannot rely on the same production schemes and capacities as 10 or 20 years ago. We have to shift higher in value chains, produce more advanced and more high value added products.
But in some sectors, it's been happening, right? For example, shared services sector, I believe. Maybe 20 years ago, we started with the very simple outsourcing, call centers.
Yes.
Today, these are much more advanced. So this is one of those sectors that is actually telling that they are the most innovative. And innovation is something that can be this factor driving our economy forward.
Yes, that's a good observation. There are a couple of sectors where we can see the advancement in value chains. So we see that the higher value added services are produced and are increasing their capacity. So one example is shared services sector. So 20 years ago there were call centers. Now we have more advanced operations like, risk management, anti-money laundering. This is the fast-growing segment. Another example is IT, so internet, in general, ICT services, like programming and this kind of things. So this is interesting because 15 years ago, the exports of IT services per capita, so if we take all exports of IT services and recalculate for the number of citizens, so the ICT exports per capita in Poland was at the same level as in India. Over 15 years, it grew for almost 4 times in Poland.
Amazing.
Whereas in India, it's stagnant. So a lot of foreign companies observed that it's more convenient to locate IT operations here in Central Europe than in India, because, Poland maybe is more expensive than India, but it's closer to Western markets. It works in the similar time zone. It's a bit easier to communicate, culturally closer. So that's why a lot of global multinational companies relocated their IT operations or services to Central Europe. And the growth has been phenomenal of this sector. I think it's even reaching the limits of the capacity. We cannot grow at this rate any longer, probably.
But if we embrace AI also in this area, so we are coming to your report. So what are the main takeaways from how Poland, Central and Eastern Europe can win its future in the AI era?
Well, we, in the report, we asked the question whether AI will be, will give advantage to emerging economies or developed economies. So will we gain from AI in relative terms or lose? Because if AI gives more advantage to developed economies, then in relative terms, emerging markets like Poland will lose. On the other hand, if it gives more advantages to emerging markets, we can converge faster. So there are different, obviously, ways to look at the problem, and we demonstrate the various scenarios. But our main hypothesis is that AI will help countries like Poland to converge faster because of the fact that it will allow to deal easier with demographic problems. So we have declining labor force. It is declining at faster rate than in other economies, Western economies. And AI may allow to increase production, especially of services, but not only, in the context of declining labor force, because it will allow more automation. And we demonstrate an interesting calculations that the exposition to AI is highest in those jobs that will be in the highest deficit in terms of labor force in 10 or 15 years, right? So those jobs that will be needed in Poland, but at the same time will lack the supply due to declining labor force, are the most exposed to AI. So this is the chance. We can use the technology to, I would say, to fill the holes caused by demographic decline. However, there is one, I would say, challenge here. We need to change our education system, how we approach education. Because, as I said, one of the pillars of our growth model is good education. However, this is, I would say, elementary education or basic skills. In terms of digital competences, Poland is not as well developed as Western countries. So if we look at various digital competence indicators, we lag behind developed markets. So we need to, I would say, grow the system to teach people how to deal with complex problems in digital world. And in order to do that, we have to grow the lifelong education system, right? Because whereas traditional capacities, competences, and skills are developed in primary or secondary school or in universities, right? So people acquire those skills and stay with them for the course of their life. Digital skills need to be updated because the technology changes. It's different today than it was 10 years ago. It was different 10 years ago than 20 years ago. So digital competences need to be updated. So we need a permanent, I would say, cycle education system. And in this area, Poland, I would say, is not performing well. So, for example, the share of workers who participate in lifelong education programs is one of the lowest in Europe, right? So we need somehow to incentivize people to learn continuously. And we propose various programs how to do that. For example, one of our proposals is to allow workers to take 1 year off their job during the course of their life to learn some new skills. And this should be financed by the state to some extent, like in Sweden.
So we have those benchmarks in other countries.
Yeah, we use benchmarks of other countries. We look at how other countries grow their lifelong learning programs, and and we propose some solutions based on Swedish example, on French example, and various other, I would say, examples from Europe.
And in the CE, you would say, for example, because normally when I think about digitalization, I think about the Baltic states. So is also Baltic states are performing better than Poland, for example, in this area?
Well, I think that Baltic states, yes, a bit better. Like, for example, Estonia is very well digitally developed country. But Baltic states, well, they are very small, like much smaller than Poland. So sometimes it's easier to be agile when you're a small country. It's more difficult when you have a very large, well, not very, but I would say mid-sized country, 40 million people.
If we talk about Europe, yes.
Yeah. A lot of people living far away from big cities. A lot of people in Poland living in areas that are not well developed, are not well connected. So it's not easy to change fast. But what I want to emphasize is that we've had a huge success due to good education. In order to continue that, we need to still invest in the education system, but do it differently than in the past. So concentrate not only on those phases of education that are at the beginning of life, right? So primary, secondary school, and higher education, but give people a chance and incentives to learn all their life. And this requires a change of I would say, mindset in policy thinking. Because policymakers are usually concentrated on schemes developed in the past, like 20 or 30 years ago. But I think that we need to change the way we look at the education system.
Yeah, and especially that, still what I understand is not changing is the fact that still these skilled people, which were as the fundament of the growth in the past 30 years, can be the growth engine for the next 30 years if we equip them in the right skills.
We have to understand the fact that in the context of declining labor force, the number of people who are entering the labor force is declining, right? So you have less and less possibilities to change the composition of skills. Because if you have every year a huge inflow of new young people, then the composition of skills and technological capacities changes very fast. But if you have a marginally low inflow of young workers, then the labor force is more stagnant, more rigid, right? It's more difficult to change. That's why we cannot count on, I would say, on this traditional education system to deal with technological change. Because first, the nature of the education system is different. It is really adjusted to growing basic skills. And second, as I said, the supply of young people is getting lower. So we need to get those who are 30, 40, 50 years of age to educate, to acquire new skills. And we cannot base that system only on corporate effort. Because, and it is important to understand, corporations and companies in general, they are obviously willing to invest in people. They are. But they are willing to invest in skills that are very company specific. So a company will not invest in skills of their workers that are easily transferable to another company, because it doesn't make sense. It's I would say waste of money. We are teaching we are giving skills to our worker, and he can take those skills and use it elsewhere. So usually corporations are growing skills that are very company specific. Whereas from the perspective of the society, from perspective of public policy, we want to develop general skills that are easily transferable. That's why those education systems, lifelong education systems, we should not rely on corporate financing and private initiatives. We should finance it from the state budget.
And if you talk to so many different people, experts, also corporate, but also from the public administration, are you more optimistic? Do you think that we are in the place that we can actually achieve it?
Well, it depends. You meet optimists and pessimists. I think in general there is still a lot of optimism in Poland. A lot of optimism. So the belief that we can keep on growing, that we have capacities, skills, dynamism, and that we can overtake even Western economies within a generation. So in general, I think there is more optimism than pessimism. And I think if I were to indicate one factor that people mention very often, is that Polish people are really extremely hardworking, which has pros and cons to me.
Of course, like everything.
I think from the perspective of companies, it is very positive. But the other side of that, I think, might be some general, I would say, psychological strain in people, in young people, also in adults. But this is the factor that people mentioned, the business people, that we have I would say, very dynamic and hardworking population. That this is the factor that differentiates us from Western Europe. That over there in Western Europe, citizens, workers are I would say settled. They want to live comfortable lives. They don't want to increase their hard work. On the contrary, they would prefer to work less, which I think is very well understandable.
Of course.
But in Poland, we still have this drive. We want to grow, earn more, and work more. So in general, I'd say that optimism dominates. However, there are obviously some, I I would say, some huge challenges. Like, for example, Polish companies are not very investment intensive. So foreign corporations invest a lot. Local mid-sized companies do not transform very fast to digital technologies. Then digital skills, which are not very well developed. Obviously, we have the elite ICT workers, which, as I said, allow the growth of services to attain double-digit rates. But if you look at the whole population, the average citizen is not very well educated in digital terms. So our elite workers are at the level of the most developed countries, whereas our average worker is below the average from the most developed markets, and this is the challenge. Yeah, but in general, I think that we are still at the moment where the perspectives are pretty good.
Okay, so we just have to, take actions. Nothing is for granted.
Yeah.
So we have everything to upgrade, but we need to take the lessons and
Exactly.
act. Thank you very much, Ignacy.
Thank you very much.